Hi, everyone. This is Ellis Murphree from the Dead Man Talking podcast. Those of you who have watched or listened to an episode or two know that I tend to be a bit hesitant to jump in with comments of my own. As a matter of fact, I tend to view myself as the first listener to these podcasts, just the guy who's got the best seat in the house. But that has caused, I would say, an occasional light frustration with some of the other men on the show. So they decided to interview me a bit regarding my own grief journey. What follows in this week's episode is a bit of that conversation. Some of the thoughts aren't brought to a close because, as with all our episodes, this is just a group of friends recording ourselves having a conversation. On these occasions that I share from my own walk of grief, I do so as a bit of an entry point to a larger conversation. My heart is always broken and for those who are in their own grief journeys. A passage of scripture that has become special to me, it's really become, I would say, missional to me, is 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4, which reads, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves have been comforted by God." In agreeing to record this episode, my heart's desire is that those of you who are in your own valleys of despair today might catch just a little glimmer of comfort and hope and the love of our dear Father in heaven. So now, here's episode 12 of the Dead Man Talking podcast.
Hi, this is Bob Roberts, and I'm the Dead Man Talking. I have stage 4 cancer in my liver and possibly only a few months to live. So I've invited 4 of my best friends from college days to talk about cancer, suffering, death, hope, and God. I can't wait for you to meet Will Gawkin, Jason Jans, Ellis Murphree, and Josh Darnell. My desire is to tackle big questions and challenges that my probable near-term demise raises, and to always season the sobering with humanity and humor. Don't expect nice and tidy solutions with a bow on top. It's going to get messy.
Welcome to episode 12 of the Dead Man Talking podcast, where we are walking on this journey of cancer with our great friend Bob Roberts. Tonight, we're actually delving into the story of Ellis Murphree, one of our dear friends who's actually walked the road of both loss and the grief that accompanies it, and has gone on quite the journey. And so before we get into Ellis' story, though, we'll get a health update here from Bob on how you're doing, man.
Hey guys, obviously still above ground, and I am now doing treatments once a week at the clinic in Arizona. They are increasing my chemo by 50%, and I have received 4 treatments now at a 50% increase in an effort to keep the cancer at bay. They're still hoping to push it back and gain a type of managed remission, but that looks less and less likely, especially when you consider that cancer will mutate and evolve to be resistant to the chemo. And as it stands right now, I'm just one click under their maximum amount of chemo dosage. So one of the things that I'd ask you to pray about is this potential opportunity in Hong Kong. And I'm trying to renew my Hong Kong ID card and work with Hong Kong University to participate in a study where they're actually targeting cancer that are on livers with a sound wave technology, a special frequency that attacks and kills that type of cancer. So, a couple requests. Number one, that I would get my Hong Kong ID card. Number two, that say even before January that I could make it over to Hong Kong for at least a couple weeks and work with some of the medical professionals at this Hong Kong university. The really amazing fringe benefit of this is if I have my Hong Kong ID card, my medical expense would be nothing, basically. I would be paying for the travel over there and, the lodging and that kind of thing. But this would be a benefit to a Hong Kong ID card holder. So, I'm so thankful for the clinic because I've been running a pretty good race this summer and preaching and teaching at different summer camps, and I'm so thankful for that. And I think I credit the clinic with keeping me above ground and giving me that capacity. But just looking ahead, it doesn't seem like that's a real sustainable option for me. So I would I would like to kind of string along, limp along with the clinic for the next maybe 2 to 3 months, and then hopefully do this do my next Hail Mary. We'll just keep doing Hail Marys for as long as I can.
So, Bob, tell us how you're feeling though throughout your body right now.
So I live with kind of a perpetual pain in my liver area there, and I think that is either the cancer winning or it is the cancer dying, and there's inflammation because of the chemo. Some days I think it's the cancer winning, some days I think it's the cancer dying. I really don't know. I'm going to get another PET scan in late August to see if there's been any progress made during the last 3 months. So I don't feel like I'm in any imminent danger, but I do feel pain in my liver. So I'm aware that I am a bit of a ticking time bomb, and boy, that keeps me rooted to reality. The reality where I die and you die and everybody dies, but nobody stays in the ground. Everybody raises back up to see King Jesus.
Thanks for sharing with us the update. And this podcast has been an up and down journey as we've walked with you, and the listeners are walking with you. And I think we can now say hundreds and hundreds of people are praying for you. And through your social updates and your travels and the podcast reach. So we know that we have the power of prayer behind you. All right, so let's shift for the topic tonight into Ellis. I think we all talked as a team about, how do we observe a grief, as C.S. Lewis talked about. And Ellis is the one who's actually lost a life partner and went through stages of grief and then kind of had this redemptive journey on the backside of it. And so we really wanted to just spend time with our friend. We call him Murph here, and hear about his personal story with his wife, Sonia. And so, Ellis, why don't you just start by kind of telling us the story of you and Sonia and, leading up to her passing, and tell us about your guys' life together.
Yeah, I guess for my personal life, what I'm doing right now, it's I guess apropos that we're talking about this tonight. I'm actually down in southern Kansas rather than back up home, and I've been dealing with Sonia's parents, some end of life stuff, and so I spent much of the day in the house surrounded by pictures of her and flipping through some scrapbooks of her and all that. So some of the stuff's back fresh, but we were married for 15 years and had 4 kids during that time, and it was a marriage that I would describe as good and easy and fun. We had a life we were living, and just kind of comfortable in that. And I was at work one day. She volunteered at a Christian school that my 3 older children were in at the time. She did some teaching there in the afternoons, and our youngest son, he is 16 now. He was just 2, would be the babysitter, and she went out to get him, and something happened. I get a call at work from the babysitter saying, "Hey, Ellis, there's something wrong with Sonia." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "Well, she's having trouble talking. She made it partway back to my house, and the ambulance is on her way to get her now. And she said, you should probably hurry." And so I did. It was a 40-mile drive for me that I covered pretty quickly. I was doing about 100 miles an hour on the interstate most of the way to get there, and I actually got to the hospital about the time the ambulance did. We didn't know what had happened at first, but she couldn't talk. She was paralyzed in one side of her body, and at the time she wasn't even making a sound. So, we didn't have smartphones. This was flip phone time, and I handed her a phone, and she typed with the one hand, "Are you ready for this?" And I lost it. That's the ER doctor at the time that was there in that our local hospital was a friend of mine. I played volleyball with him, and he called me into a private room, and he said, "Ellis, here's what's going on. It's a brain aneurysm. We're going to life flight her down to Wichita, Kansas." And he was so humming around it. I just asked him, "Is she going to make a flight?" And he goes, "Maybe." So there was some question whether she would get there. Well, she did make the flight. She lived for 3 more days, got some speech back. The night she died was September the 8th in 2012. I was helping feed her dinner. And then I stepped out of the room for just a second to take a phone call. While I was on the call, her sister, who was in there with her, called me and said, "You better get in here." And I go in there, and she had crashed. She was starting to crash, and then she crashed completely. I mean, I remember I'm standing over there. I'm shaking her. I'm slapping her face. She's trying to get some response as the medical staff's coming in. They shoved me out of the way, and I actually fell down in the hallway. Just lost the ability to walk. And I looked in there, and there's an orderly on top of her giving her chest compressions, and we go to a private room with the family, and I'm hugging my kids. I remember my son, who's 22 now. He's just looking at me confused, like what does this mean? What does this mean? And the doctor came in after a little bit and gave words that sound promising, but they weren't. He said, "She's stabilized. We got her stabilized." And then he went into some description of what stabilized meant. There was zero brain activity. She wasn't breathing on her own. There was no heart function. There was nothing. They had her on machines. So she and I had talked about that before. I went back in, and they removed life support. So I watched her die a second time in an hour. My kids came in and gathered around with her parents, her sister, my pastor and his wife were there, and then another man who had been an important man in my theological training as an adult was there, and he prayed as we held hands. I think I remember I bowed my head, and my my little guy, I say he's eye to eye with me now, but my 2-year-old at the time, he's actually under the bed playing with a little Matchbox car, just innocent and oblivious to all of it. So that was the earthquake. I drove my kids back home. It was about a 2.5-hour drive that night, and I remember going on this stretch of highway as we were leaving Wichita, and in the minivan, and they're all behind me, and I'm looking, and they're all asleep, and I just got so overwhelmed. I prayed aloud, "Lord, how am I supposed to do this?" That's the story of those 3 days, and so a brand new journey began, and a new reality. You're thrust into this space where there was never a point in my life that I was planning on ever being a single dad, and there wasn't a point in my life where I anticipated outliving a spouse, or my kids being raised half orphans. So all that stuff changed in a thunderclap. Just everything's good one day. I mean, we'd been on a camping trip the week before. Everything was good 1 week prior. The day she died was 1 week, or was 6 days after we returned from a camping trip. So there's part one.
I remember hearing the news and, walking into that space with you. And I think you've shared some of this on previous episodes. But this is the first time maybe we can talk about like what were the early days and weeks like and the challenges as that extended into a year as you think through like some of the emotional challenges, the spiritual challenges, and just the challenges of being a single parent. And instead of having 2 on 4, you got 1 on 4. And of course, you're navigating their grief as well. So, can you speak a little bit about that?
I've said this before, probably in every podcast where I've even referenced this. There was probably a solid 18 months, maybe longer there, that is pretty blurry to me. You're now. I do remember points where I just thought, man, I'm navigating this better than probably anyone ever has. You're thinking, I'm so clear. I've got the answers. I'm making all these good decisions. And when I look back on those early days, it was, you're amputated all of a sudden. You're trying to walk with no legs, and you're trying to hug your kids with an arm missing, and it's just everything everything was just hard. And then dealing with my kids was hard, and dealing with and trying to take time to process my own emotion. I mean, I was going through times of sadness where I would, just flip through pictures on our laptop of her and just bawl. Where I would hear a song that brought back a memory and just lose it. I told a story maybe after we recorded, but on last week's episode about just being in the middle of a grocery store and a song plays over the PA, and suddenly I'm having a good day, and suddenly I'm bawling and just throw my groceries down on the floor and run out of the store. And then there were moments of just absolute anger. I would get frustrated with, I don't know. I remember being in the kitchen once, and I was frustrated with where I found a certain pan that Sonia had put in a weird place. I didn't understand it, and I yelled how stupid that was and slammed the cabinet door, and it broke off broken 2 pieces. I wasn't really mad at Sonia for where she put that pan. I just had anger and sleep deprivation and sadness and grief and all this stuff. And at the same time, I had jumped into this mode of trying to be, super dad and super Christian and super, I'm going to do this better than it's ever been done. And those early days were not only the struggle you would anticipate, but there was just maybe some weight I was carrying alone that I shouldn't have. I told Josh this story earlier tonight. I started attending a different church than we were attending. And I was under so much duress. I needed to talk. I set up an appointment with the pastor. It was a guy I actually known when we were kids. So I get in his office, and I said, Carrie, here's what I'm going through in my head right now. And here's the dark thoughts. Here's where the space I'm feeling suicidal at times. I'm dealing with depression where there were 2 days in a row last week I didn't get out of bed, all this stuff. And he was a humble and I think wise man in the moment. And he says, he prayed with me and he cried with me, and he said, some of this is a little beyond my training. And he gave me a list of some counselors to go to, which I appreciate. And he introduced me to this thing called Grief Share and suggested I find a group. And what I told Josh when we talked about this earlier tonight is I think his humility in that moment, not being so arrogant, is to think he could just Bible his way or Bible me through it, but send me to places with training and to a program. I don't want to be so over the top as to say he saved my life, but maybe some of the dark clouds, the deep depression, those days of where I would lie in bed for days and not get up. Some of those things started to subside through the work I began doing, through those resources he pointed me to.
What was the time? What month was that you started going to Grief Share? Just so we can understand the.
That was maybe 10 months after, so it was in late summer of 2013. So I would say, she passed away in early September. It was probably July, August time frame that I went to my first session of Grief Share.
So I want to go back a little bit if I can, Murph, and go. You said when it happened, I was going to be super Christian, super dad, and I was going to do this better than anybody else. When did you start to realize you were not super dad and you were not super Christian, and you started to that there was cracks in that effort?
I took my kids and dropped them off at their grandparents, again, a couple hours away from us for a week. And I cried and I didn't answer my phone. And that was kind of the darkness I was in. And that was kind of the point. I was like, okay, there's a possibility that I'm not handling this very well. So
Yeah. So I think to go to Will's kind of point on framing, this I think might be able to help people. Is this happened? You said I'm going to just white knuckle through this thing. How? When did that collapse? When was the week in bed post her passing?
I would guess it was, within 6 weeks or so prior to me going
Okay.
and speaking to my
Okay.
pastor.
So
That
no
would be
matter
my
how
guess.
hard you tried, you couldn't muscle past 6 weeks because it was overwhelming on every level, and it sounds like you had a total and absolute collapse.
Yeah, well, that scene, by 6 weeks, probably 6 weeks before I went to my pastor, is probably when I realized I couldn't handle it anymore. But all that said, as I look back, that probably wasn't my first week like that. It definitely wasn't my first day like that. I had a lot of days and weeks like that. Once my kids got back in the full swing of school, they were out of school for a couple of weeks. Once I got back to the full swing of school, and I had an empty house and just silence where there shouldn't be, and memories where there should have been a person. I was still trying to deceive myself through it, but boy, those were
Okay,
hard times.
so you tried to be the strong man. You had moments of collapse, but you had this total thing you described about the week long collapse 6 weeks before you finally went to a pastor and reached out for help. Is that accurate?
I believe so. Yeah.
Roughly, yeah. But then you said these words, and I just want to spend some time here. You said he didn't try to Bible me through it. Now, I can imagine that some of our listeners might be shocked by that, could even be offended by the fact that you said that, because there's a verse in the Bible that says God has given us everything that pertains to life and godliness. So was the Bible not enough? Talk a little bit about what it meant to be Bibled through something that maybe seemed non-redemptive, and what he did that felt redemptive to you.
There was sometimes an arrogance that would say that when we're going through the hardest things in life, read your Bible more, pray more, and if you can't get through that, the pastor probably has the answers. And I actually had that frame of thought as well. I'm making it really dumbed down, and I apologize for that. It's not that simplistic, but I went to that pastor for counseling. Just I'm looking for something, Carrie. Can you help me through this? And the thing I appreciated about him is he recognized where his strengths and weaknesses lied, and he counseled people plenty. But part of what I was throwing in his lap, he's like, yeah, you need something. You need someone that's got more training in this aspect than me. So rather than platitudes and the same verses I already knew, in the same exposition I probably already knew, he did point me towards trained help, biblical trained help.
But it sounds to me like he actually validated the gravity of your situation and seemed like he was able to be one of the first objective people to look in and say, you have a really, really significant hurt, loss, grief, and I think I can help you some, but I actually think you need some people that are really good at this. I mean, there's got to be a way in which
Yeah,
I know, I just think I just know you as a friend to know that, like, uh, I think you've just been a guy who just grinds through suffering. Like it's been part of your entire life, and you would just kind of like just bear it. And he was like, "No, no, no, you are a hurt unit. You need 911 care." I mean, is that?
yeah.
Did you feel that from him?
I did, and the way I felt, it's not like he was shirking responsibility in that point. And the way he loved me. I mean, he sat there and he listened, and he wept, and he prayed, and he offered me some strongholds, but all that was also with, man, you need more than I can give you as well. And he didn't just pawn me off because we were still having the conversations. It was loving. It was shepherding. I appreciated, and to this day, and he's not in the pastorate anymore, that man, but I appreciate to this day his gentleness and humility through that whole thing. He saved me a boatload more of pain, I think.
All right, so then talk to us about your entrance then, because that was your gateway into Grief Share, and this is it seems like where you started to find real help. So talk a little bit about how that looked.
Yeah, so I go to my first thing of Grief Share so skeptically. I mean, I didn't I didn't want to be there. I didn't go immediately to Grief Share. I signed up a couple of different times at a couple of different places and backed out. Finally, I went and I show up, and it was actually at a Catholic church, and I go in, and there is the first session. We all wrote our name down, had one of the placards in front of us, and everyone's going around and telling a little bit of their story. There was a husband and wife that are probably about the age that we are now, who had lost their young adult daughter in an accident. There was someone who had lost a sibling to cancer. There was an elderly lady who had just lost her husband. And I don't remember the others, but there was about 10 of us in this class. All had lost someone. Some of them in the last year, some of them were a decade into their grief and were just coming to the place that I was as far as getting into a group. And I heard their stories, and the first session was hearing their stories and hearing our grief share leader almost like leaning into our pain with just love and assuring us we were safe in that space, and that there wasn't going to be hardcore counseling, but there wasn't going to be platitudes either. We did some work in a book, and we watched video, and that first night was my first introduction to the ministry of Paul David Tripp, who was featured prominently throughout that version of Grief Share they had at the time. And I just remember thinking, well, this is different than stuff I've been around in my life around grief, and it was beautiful. There started to be hope. I actually went through that 13-week session, and then I went through another 13-week section of the exact same stuff after that as well. It was so helpful to me. The work they had us do, the conversations we had, and just some of the many things that they taught us through it. And I think they're part of what was so beautiful is that you're in a community of sufferers at the same time, a community of grievers, and starting to hear things like that anger you're feeling isn't abnormal, that that deep, dark sadness that you're feeling. Yeah, I feel that and I felt that as well.
Seems like it gave you time to process, to be okay with being in the middle of the pain.
For the way that I tend to go through and process things, I can be contemplative in spaces, but a lot of times I do my processing with my mouth moving, especially back then. And that was there was space for that and an acceptance of that and an encouragement and love of that. Yeah, it was
This
good.
is kind of this is a little bit in the weeds, but like you said, like you scheduled a couple times and then you bailed. How how long did it take you until it was like how long in that first session, or what was the moment that you're like, I'm so glad I came? And then the reason why I'm asking is I'm wondering if there's people that are listening that maybe you're on the bubble of going to find community, and what you could, what you think about them getting into that, and when should they do that?
Yeah, I think the moment that I felt like this is going to be a place this is going to be a place I can maybe process some difficult things in was the second person that talked in there. It was a woman of about somewhere in her early mid 50s. I told you her and her spouse were there. They had lost their young adult daughter. I remember her name. Her name was Kevin. I'd never met a woman named Kevin. But as she was talking through that grief, the rawness and the tears, actual weeping, which caused all of us to weep at that table. And I'm looking around at, 12 people crying. I understood that I'd found my people for that moment. And I had no contact with any of those people outside of the sessions. I've never touched bases with any of them since that first group. But for 13 weeks, they were my people, and I was part of their little tribe, and it was vital. So yeah, I think the first tears that ended up being not just tears of one person, but kind of an enjoyed grief. It was it was a little taste of glory for me.
So, Ellis, I think we have heard of Paul David Tripp, and most people would describe him as a Bible guy. And it sounds like you went through this curriculum twice. So, there's actually a sense in which, like, he Bibled you through it, probably. But I guess there's a way it can be delivered. And for those who haven't been through Grief Share, can you give a couple, I think just some breadcrumbs or nuggets of like two or three truths that like were powerful to you, that are divine truths that became, we often use like the term here, handholds, that you could grab onto during that time?
One was it's okay not to be okay. Grief comes in waves, and sometimes you're okay, and sometimes you're just not. That was actually one of the more freeing truths in Grief Share. There was like a permission to like feel everything, the sadness and the anger and the guilt and the numbness and the stuff that I was trying to push down and not let out. There was actually some freedom in that. There was actually one session where they talked a great deal about John 11:35. Um, Actually changed my entire um, way I interpret that simple verse of Jesus wept. The fact Jesus never actually rebuked the brokenhearted for weeping in that moment. So that was one. Um, Grief is a journey. It's not a moment. You never move on. You just find ways to move forward. And that might sound like just some weird psychological mumbo jumbo, but it's a very important way to frame it. You don't get over this stuff. I mean, I'm 9 years into a marriage, my second marriage, and she is loving, and we have challenges, of course, because it was both of our second marriage, so we're both coming at it out of unmet expectations. but I love her dearly. Um, she is my wife for life, right? And but I still miss Sonia deeply. Um, today, just driving around that town, the first town that we lived in as a married couple, before we had children, even driving around that town and remembering things, remembering little restaurants that don't exist anymore that we used to eat at, and little moments, still moments we had here and there. I miss that. And both those things can be true. I can love my wife dearly and still miss my first wife um, more than I can express. So I think part of that grief is a journey, not a moment. It doesn't mean we get over the thing completely. One of the more helpful things I remember, there was an older couple in our church, and Jason, if I can remember their names, you would remember them. We've talked about them before because they used to attend the church you grew up in when you were a teenager. But they were my church, and she had lost her first husband. She lost her first husband when she was in her early 20s. She had been remarried for over 30 years. And I remember asking her, anticipating an answer that was going to give me some hope. I remember saying, so, so it does get a little easier with time, or you do get over it eventually. And she's like, oh no, no, I love my husband dearly. We've had all these kids together. No, you don't ever get over it. Actually, that was a little hard in the moment. Right now, I'm like, well, what a beautiful thing to hear, because there's no pressure. I mean, she kind of helped remove
Yeah.
the pressure
Yeah.
of having to rush through
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was that was that was beautiful. One of the big things that I learned through Grief Shared, it was probably because I went through it twice and then taught through 4 different 13-week sessions of it. And I probably didn't catch this until what was probably my fifth time through the curriculum. God uses our wounds to help others heal. And there is that's part of the beauty of that curriculum, was how it did help to equip us to minister out of our pain a little bit. As a matter of fact, when I went to the church and say I want to bring a grief share here, I shared that passage from 2 Corinthians 1. Thanks be to God that the God of all comforts comforts our affliction, so we can comfort those their affliction with the same comfort that we received in ours, right? So our story, and even our weakness becomes a testimony of God's strength in those spaces.
I think if we can walk into that space a little bit and go, okay, you went through this grief share, you went through it twice, and then you became a facilitator for grief share. I actually think that's like a pretty significant shift. Somewhere in that healing journey, you decided to go sit in the chair of the facilitator and then hold the emotional space for the half dozen or dozen people sitting around that was just you not many months earlier. I mean, talk about the journey you went from, okay, now it's time for me to turn around and bear the grief of others.
I'll point you to a moment that was a bit of a catalyst for that. There had been a horrible. Yeah, I was living in a pretty small town in north central Kansas. There had been a horrible farming accident where a little girl was killed in a combine her father was driving. I mean, it rocked the whole community. I went to the funeral, and it's like the whole community turned out for this thing. Well, the mother of that daughter worked in my doctor's office, and I went there for an appointment, and she was the one that checked me in and was doing all the vitals, blood pressure, and all this. And I told her a little bit about Grief Share, and actually we were talking through just some of that. Not that she was there to have a conversation with me about the grief she was going through, but this was within 3 weeks of her daughter dying. And she just started weeping, and we hugged. And, I told her about this great program, but there was nothing close at the time in that town. There's actually, I think, 3 churches in that town, that little tiny town, that offer it now. But I walked away from the doctor's office that day thinking, man, we really need grief share here close. I could probably do that. I mean, that was like
Awesome.
I want to kind of be part of that out of there. And when I went to our church board at the church I was attending at the time and told them about it, I laid out. I wrote out. I still have the notes. They're still on that same Bible I was using, but I wrote out the notes of what I was going to say to them to try to convince them, like I was going to have to twist their arms. And I was probably 2 minutes in, and one of them raised their hand, and they're like, "So how much money do you need to get this going? And what night of the week do you want the church?" It was just kind of like, here we go. Let's go. We affirm this. Let's just. When do you want to start? Do you need a budget to advertise on the radio? What do you need? So yeah, it was. But yeah, it was that moment of seeing someone where I could see the same thing in her eyes that I'd had in mind, and I could see the angst and the seeming hopelessness and a looking to latch on, and I thought, man, I think I could be part of maybe helping a little bit there.
I mean, that was love, right? You just
Yeah.
moved in love. So now you started your grief share group. You're sitting in the chair. What was that like?
I would say, first of all, it's pretty important that the people that are facilitators in these things have not only gone through but have experienced great loss. Because I had a lot more answers sitting in that chair than I probably would have thought that I had if I had done that 3 years before, when I had not gone through the loss. I remember the last cohort that we had before I moved out of that town. The last cohort we had was large. The space we had was kind of busting, and it was mostly women, mostly young women in that one who had lost a child. And nobody has to share anything in that, but we gave them the option, and they all shared through tears. And by the time they were done for me to introduce the program to them and to welcome them formally, I couldn't even talk. I was so moved and so overwhelmed with their pain and their grief. And through tears, all I could say was, "I'm sorry, and I love you, and I'm glad you're here, and I hope you can find some light for your journey through what we're going to do here over the next 13 weeks." So what was it like sitting in that chair? It was similar, except for I had to move it along. I mean, I was still learning every time I went through that curriculum. Like I said, I did it a total of 7 times, I think, and it was
Wow.
the exact same curriculum all 7 times. And
You led
I
seven grief share groups?
I led 4. I went through 2 or 3 prior to that.
You move with real ease and skill with it. And I was even the last episode, as Tara was just talking, and most of us were asking questions. You were actually pretty quiet, and I think Jay teed you up, and you just said things with like ease. Like one time you said I don't know if you remember the widow standard time, and Tara immediately just, I mean, she was like, yes, what other things like that? Maybe you have like a couple of those that just are connected to those first year challenges, the emotional, the logistical or spiritual challenges that you could maybe just share for folks.
Yeah, I'll explain that term widow standard time at first. And for those who are listening who have lost a spouse, you probably already know what I'm talking about, even if you don't have that phraseology for it. But there's a weird thing that happens where you are suddenly infused with this tremendous energy. It happens, it's common. It happens sometime after around week 3 to 8, somewhere in there. Can last for quite a while. You're suddenly sleeping 1 or 2 hours a night. You have all the energy in the world. It's the cleanest my house had ever been. The most ironed all my kids' school clothes ever were. The most prepped our meals were for the week. Yeah, that widow standard time is. There's a book about it out there that I read. Trying to figure out why I wasn't sleeping anymore. Yeah, I mean, there's some strange things that happen through that first year. You know, one of the things you always hear cautioned to those who have lost a spouse is don't make a big decision that first year. Don't buy a house, don't sell a house, don't move. I suppose there's some sense in that, but I referenced a little bit earlier tonight. There is this weird thing where you're thinking, man, I never had this much clarity in my life. Like I'm nailing every stinking decision. Just, I mean, bring it on. I can handle more. I look back now and I'm like, you're an idiot. I mean, what were you thinking? That was a dumb way to spend $15,000, you know, or whatever the case may be. I wish I had been wise enough in those early days to find someone who had already walked through that to kind of be a mentor to me. I I approached a couple people about helping me with specific things, but they had never gone through this, and it was a little overwhelming to them. Some people I trusted there. I wish I had sought out the right kind of person. Community is so important in the grief, but I think even mentorship and man, if you've lost someone, you've lost a spouse, and someone in your circle or circle adjacent loses a spouse, it's a good place to maybe lean in and offer some moments. You can be that angel from heaven for a short time for them.
Ellis, after you did the first grief share that you facilitated, what made you sign up to do it a second time?
I was seeing through these people the same thing I saw through myself through this. There was just these moments and these glimpses of hope. No, none of us were fixed coming out of grief share. I mean, I went through it 7 times. I wasn't fixed coming out of it, but there was enough encouragement. There was enough light. There was enough space where people who came in desperate. I remember one lady that came in and she was so angry. Her first night, she's articulating, why would God even do that? Her situation, she had been a caretaker of a child who was severely mentally handicapped. For 23 years or 20 some years, she had done everything for him. He'd never walked, never talked, never been able to do anything for himself. She dressed him and bathed him and changed him and cleaned up his filth and fed him and everything else. And this kid had been nothing but a burden for her, had done nothing to cause her to love him, and she had given her life to him, just loved him for the 20 some years, and then he got sick and died. And she was angry at God for making him like that, for making her love him like that, and then for taking him away from her. She had lost a marriage in the process, and to see her at the end of it, not past all the anger, but I was seeing glimmers of hope and smiles and actually places where she felt the kiss of God on her cheeks, you know. So those moments made me want to go back for more, because I saw healing where from night one there's no chance here to at the end of 13 weeks seeing, man, there's like hope. There's maybe it's a little glimmer, but there's hope there where there was none a few months ago.
You were not completely healed, and
Sure.
now you're sitting there walking people down the road of healing. I mean, there's that phrase we often use in Christian counseling about the wounded healer. How did this change you as a wounded healer of others?
Well, I mean, I would say, first of all, I'm still not completely healed, and I doubt I will be. I have such a deeper love for the hurting than I've ever had. and such a fuller desire to like lean into those really difficult spaces that a lot of times I know prior to Sonia's death, one of your spouses had passed away. I would be there. I would hug you. I'd tell you I loved you. But I know part of me feels like I'd be a little handcuffed and how hard I could lean in because I wouldn't understand all that as well as I do now. They're going through that grieving process myself. There's this freedom to lean into the spaces that a lot of us just frankly don't know how to lean into, and that's not a knock. Praise God that you guys don't have the experiential expertise of having. I mean, Josh, you have buried a wife, but I praise the Lord that you guys are all still married to your first wives. You don't have that experiential expertise to maybe lean into those spaces to the same depth as quickly as I can, and I don't. There's beauty and health for me in those spaces.
So, Murph, you then talked about you wanted to talk a little bit about God's sustaining grace during this time and where you saw Him, where you didn't, but you know He was there, and maybe some Bible passages that actually did sustain you. Talk a little bit about those.
In the moments, and I've shared this with you guys before. In those early days, I felt a presence of the Spirit that it's hard for me to even describe today. Just a weird comfort, right? Um, but
Amen.
but it wasn't something that took away the pain or even numbed the pain. And there were times, particularly when I would see, I kept Sonia's cell phone for a while. I kept the number for a while. And every now and again, there would be a voicemail on there from my oldest son. He was 14. And there would be a voicemail from him to her just saying, "Mom, I love you. I miss you." I would cry when those came across. And man, it would be anger and cries of injustice. And, I remember thinking at times, I can get, maybe I deserve this, God, but he doesn't. And so those were some moments where I didn't necessarily see God unless I saw an angry one, And some of the verses at the time, Psalm 30, I think it's Psalm 34. He is near to the brokenhearted. That was a mantra for me at times. We just quote it over and over. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercy never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Sometimes I would rehearse these things as a spiritual discipline, even if I didn't feel them in my soul.
Amen.
But I look back now and I do see God's faithfulness a little bit more clearly looking back than I ever did in that moment.
How would you encourage others to talk to other people about grief and about the Lord?
I think part of how I would encourage them to talk, it might be I would encourage them not to talk. Those tend to go hand in hand a little bit. Let them understand as best you can. This isn't good. This isn't good, and yes, God will get glorified, but it's not going to make you feel better about it. And this is hard, and this shouldn't happen. I like what our buddy Bob Roberts has been saying a lot lately. How have you put it, Bob? Man, how I hate the serpent.
Oh yeah, amen.
All this stuff just always serves to remind us of the brokenness of this world and the need for restoration. So I would encourage you, if you have these people in your life that are going through a darker valley than you can imagine. I think in the early days after Sonia died, I might have been you, Jason, that put this on social media somewhere where you're asking people to pray for your friend who is going through that thing that we all fear, that valley none of us even want to think about going through. When you find people in that space, I think it's okay to tell them that this isn't a good thing, but that you love them. And even though you don't feel it or see it right now, God does still love you, and He's sad. He's sad at this too.
And where does the hope lie in all this for you?
The main hope here is there's promise in the resurrection of Jesus. Like there is this promise that death has been defeated, that death is coming to an end. When we taste of death, Paul says, oh, death, where is your victory? Oh, death, where is your sting? When you actually feel something that feels like death is won, and you feel it in your soul, like that deep, dark sting of death, the only place we have hope is the resurrection of Jesus. That's the hope we hang everything on, because without the resurrection of Christ, then this is even more tragic to me, because there actually is no victory over this, and there is no hope beyond this, and there is no life after this, and her death becomes even more tragic to me without the hope of the resurrection.
Murph, if you could sit with somebody freshly grieving right now, as many of our listeners are that we've heard, what would you tell them?
Well, one thing, and I've said this already tonight, is that this is hard, this is terrible, and this isn't the way it's supposed to be. It's okay to feel the waves of grief you're going to feel. Time is just time. A year from now, you're still going to be hurting, and 20 years from now, you're still going to be hurting. But lean into Jesus, and the 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 way you're going to feel the nearness of the Lord in the next 18 months is going to be something you're going to crave 5 years from now. That's something. That's a small sliver, but I'll tell you, when I go back and look at some of those early days, and I read some of my journals and what I was learning from God during that time, and the depth of what was coming out of me from the same Holy Spirit that inspired Scripture. I'm not saying my stuff is inspired like that, but it's the same Holy Spirit pouring in me as comfort, and something flowing out of me from that. I crave that. Bob's mentioned that with his cancer, like he wouldn't give that depth he's experiencing now. He doesn't want to ever slip out of that space. That's the beauty of that. Is one of the redemptive beauties of that darkness. So lean into that and love that. And I would also say, man, find community. You're in the right community right now with folks that can actually get down and dirty and walk alongside you. Go find another one. You need community. One of the most dangerous places in your grief is isolation. It is horribly dangerous for your soul and your psyche. Find
Yeah.
community.
Amen. I kind of want you to drill down on that a little bit. This week, I spoke with a former seminary professor, really, really dear friend, Tom Wheeler, who lost his dear wife, Becky, in 2016, actually to cancer as well. And Becky had been doing IPT chemo, same as me. And I think it prolonged her days a little bit, but she ended up passing away. And he talked about how Grief Share, same program you were in, had just really helped him. And now he currently is leading the Grief Share program at his church there in Greenville.
Oh, that's
Um,
so good.
I have had in the great, yeah, so praise the Lord. And we got to talk, and he got to tell me his experience as he traveled with Becky through the valley of cancer. And of course, Tom is just he he has the sweet aroma of Christ all over him, and of course he's giving now. Having been served by Grief Share, he's now comforting others, and he's leading it. As I get to travel, guys, I feel like this podcast has become a bit of a band-aid for people that are unwilling to do the full dive into community. That this has been kind of an easy, accessible, let's just watch it at home, or I can watch this in my safe space. And what I hear Ellis saying is, man, you gotta find community, and that may not that may not resonate with people that were raised necessarily in our faith tradition. And so I'm wondering if we could just give a little bit more help to your exhortation of find community. Like what's a baby step in that direction? Because, you know, uh, I know this podcast has been a blessing, but it's a band-aid. And people need people. You need face-to-face people.
Ellis, would you be willing to run a grief share with Dead Man Talking listeners who don't have community, or perhaps they do would say, I have friends and I have relationships, but they don't know how to speak into this space as well as I've heard you speak? Would you be willing to provide community for those that don't have it who listen to this podcast?
Bob calls what we're doing here a band-aid. I think part of what real community is skin on skin, face to face, deep burden bearing. Grief share for me when
Tears
I went through
mingling.
it. Yeah, yes. Grief share when I went through it, it was a little bit of community for a season, but it actually pushed me more into the arms of a loving community of within a local body that I craved. And I didn't realize how much I craved it and how foreign the concept actually was to me through my 40 years of being in church.
Yeah, but I
I
think Murph, you would say there are people who are in communities who are not in community,
correct.
and there are actual Christian communities that would not, they would teach that emotions are bad and you shouldn't listen to them. And so, like, there are perhaps some people that actually have nowhere to go, or at least feel like they don't have anywhere to go. Sometimes people don't have somebody that's you, and you connect, and you have learned this, and there's going to be a trust with what you've gone through that they would hand you the gifts of their stories.
It's true.
Yeah. I think thoroughly enjoy that from the perspective of, I mean, as weird as this sounds, one of the great privileges of my life post loss has been those seasons that I've been able to walk with people who have lost, even if that's just for a couple of brief conversations, but to let them see a kindred spirit in that moment. It's beautiful, and I enjoy that. It's spiritually invigorating and rejuvenating for me. It's life. So yeah, I would love to lean into that, but um, I I I also would, in that same vein, still be pushing folks to, man, if you can't find that community in your current ecclesiastical body, maybe you should
Just
find
think of it
another
as the
body.
upgrade. You're the stepping stone. You're the gateway drug into real community. So like if the podcast is a band-aid, Ellis, you're the Superman band-aid right before real community.
I just want to say a few things to you, Ellis. And one is like, man, I love you, bro. Oh my gosh. Like, I just reminded, I think we met senior year of high school, like in 1990. And what a journey 35 years has been. And you just have become such a fine man and a testimony, and in some ways, a real rock. And I think because of your upbringing, sometimes you looked at me as your rock because your home was just bereft of what a kid needed sometimes. But I'm sitting here as a 52-year-old man saying, I think you're a little bit of my rock because you've developed some footings in your life um, that have done extreme and deep work to make you what you are today. So I think I think secondly, I'm proud of you. Like I'm just proud of how you took the suffering and turned it into glory and
Mm,
redemptive. You made the redemptive move where I think some people can stay in the victim frame and not move to a like victor or giver. And I think that's hard. And I don't blame people for not doing it, but like you were able to make that turn. And I'm proud of you. I'm proud to be your friend for the strength that you showed there. And then I think the part of me that hit me like a ton of bricks was the week you had in bed. And inside I have this regret going, why did I not call? And I say this not because I need to be told that that's okay. I say it to anybody who's listening who has somebody who's been through deep suffering or loss that, once the funeral passes and once the people help out for a month and drop off meals, it's the month 3, 6, 9, 12, 2 year anniversary stuff that perhaps a call might find somebody in bed upside down and maybe need companionship at a time. And that just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I wish I would have been there in that moment. I'm already flipping through the file in my mind. I mean, I just did a funeral for somebody I was mentoring, and I thought, I wonder how her mom is doing. And so I think you just opened up a vein and like really let us have a window into what suffering and grief was like because we're listening to our lives while we listen to yours. And so those were just three key thoughts I just wanted to share with you, brother. In closing, I love you.
love you,
And
man. Thank you.
I want to be a better lover to those who are suffering as well.
That's good.
And I just want to say I love hanging out with you, Ellis. I want to just get in a car and go on a long drive and talk. I just have oodles of brotherly affection for you and a steely trust. I trust you. And
I love
I
that.
trust you with my story. I trust you with my emotions. And I can't wait until we can hang out again. So that I don't have 3 points, but I hope that the sincerity of that comes through, brother. I love you, man.
I, Ellis, I'd like for you to know that uh, when I found out that your story was going to be told, I just jumped into the Lord's arms and said, "Please help him," because I knew that the Lord um, was going to use this to exemplify how good the Lord is and gracious in great difficulty. I wish I could put you in my ruck bag and you and I go back to Ukraine for the next 6 months, and I could just I could take you to my friends who've lost so many people, and I'd say, "Hey, I need you to introduce you to somebody. It's really Christ, but this is Murph. I just want you guys to talk for a little bit." I also would love to have been able to have you next to me when I was trying to encourage one of my soldiers to take the rifle out of his mouth because he had lost um, his wife. He was thinking about ending his life. So, but the reality is, tonight was everything I prayed for, and I'm really thankful that the Lord was honored and given space. When the average person in the world thinks about death, they think about the Grim Reaper. And I don't, that may be Luciferian, something to do with the devil. I think as a follower of Christ, when we think about death, I think there's a beauty in knowing that the Lord is there, near and dear, as he made that very clear in Psalm 23. So thank you for tonight, brother. Big time.
This is very moving, Ellis. And we did the summer at the Wilds, right, with Jay, and we kind of just played hard. Um, and then when Sonia passed away, we do like phone calls every once in a while. And then we did that the group, the five of us, the the other group of friends, and we went in Colorado and we started doing that deep work. I left that so convicted because I didn't know any of that story before that time, and all the stuff growing up and the brokenness. And I think I personally would hear from you like that you looked at all the other four of us as like awesome, and you said I'm you guys are up here and I'm the little brother, I'm down here.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I don't think that at all. Like I really, when Jay said about him being the rock and you were the one needing the rock, dude, man, you are a rock. And and I really need to sit and learn how to suffer, uh like you've been teaching. And it's a privilege to call you a friend and a brother. And I just want to say the same thing. I love you. And I'm so thankful for
Mm,
those 5 years we did pounding through emotionally healthy stuff and family of origin
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
and the gospel according to Ellis, the gospel according to Will. And then just to see you going through even trials right now, and you're just steady, and you're putting one foot in front of the other. I love what you said earlier too. You said, I had all these thoughts, or the gospel truths of the word, but I would just recite them. And even though I didn't quite believe them, I was having a step of faith in those. And so thanks, Alice. I just love you. And thanks for sharing your story. And thanks for being vulnerable. And thanks so much.
Galatians 4:19 Paul says, "My dear children, for whom I am again in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you." And that verse hit me, Murph, because I believe you like went through pain to see Christ formed in people who are suffering. And you did that again tonight. You exemplified what that means. And so it's a gift to us to tell your story, and get it out there so more people can be blessed. So you can have the final word there, Murph, before we sign off tonight.
Thank you guys for making me do this. It was a blessing. One to be heard a little bit, but this feedback you guys have given me is life giving. So thank you. I love all you men.
With that, we will conclude episode 12 of the Dead Man Talking podcast. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for joining us today on the Dead Man Talking podcast. We hope this conversation impacted you. And if you know somebody else who could use it and be blessed by it, feel free to share it. Let's remember, we never know how many conversations we have left. So let's be grateful for every single one and make everyone count. God bless, and we look forward to our next talk together.